All right, friends, here we are, one video a day for the first 100 days of 2025. This is video number 6. Let's get it. The topic today is 10 ideas of what to do if your property isn't selling right now. Across the country, we know that basically there's what you can consider a national market and just a general overall economy, but what really matters is your local market. And one of the biggest things we've been seeing really since the end of 2022, 2023 into 24, and now going in 25, what we've really been seeing is a slowdown of transactions. So when you have a property for sale, dependent on your market, things may take longer. Basically, there's less buyers out there buying, and therefore the transactions are lower. Most markets are either already or becoming a buyer's market, meaning buyers have choices and basically there is inventory starting to rise as far as properties sitting on the market, and so they have options. So with that being said, let's jump into the 10 ideas that I have. Maybe this is a property you have that you are flipping that is for sale. Maybe this is a property that, hey, you had it as a rental and you put it for sale. I know I put some of my rentals for sale in 2024, and none of them sold, or so we're going to sell at a price I wanted to sell them at. So these were some of the things I had to do myself. Maybe it's a primary residence. I did sell a primary residence in 2024, but it was one where I was not aiming to get top of market, and I was able to get it to work. So let's kind of talk through it and get going. Tip number one, obviously you can reduce the price. This is a very difficult conversation, because ultimately, so I had a rental that, we could have maybe started at 205, but the comps, there wasn't a ton of great comps to really say, okay, this is what the property is worth. And so we started at I think 195, and we kept lowering over time. As the months ticked past, we kept lowering it to around 160. And when we got to 160, we really had a conversation, and ultimately we could have dropped the price to literally 100 or 110. So 50 grand drop, which relative to that price is a big drop. But the question there, and this is something that, I'm not a real estate agent, but I sit in rooms with a lot of real estate agents. The question becomes, who are you dropping the price to, or for? And the question is there anyone else in the room? Is there anyone listening? Is there anyone paying attention when you're dropping that price? And a lot of people are dropping price thinking that it will attract buyers. And sometimes I think it does. But the bigger thing there is because of the low, transaction volume with buyers, you're dropping the price potentially to no one. And so you want to be mindful with dropping the price, but it's always an option. You definitely want to make sure that you're priced aggressively. You want to look at not only the recent solds, but you want to look at the pendings, and you also want to look at the active for sale. What are you competing against, especially in your neighborhood? Basically, the comparables that are a true apple to apple comparison to the property that you have. And so, what is really important when thinking about dropping your price? There's something called a seller net. And this is something real estate agents operate in this world, but you as investors should operate in this concept where you take your sales price and subtract things like the commissions that you're going to be responsible for. Look at what are your commissions cost for your side. And then also you want to then subtract any like liens, mortgages, judgments that you have against that price. It's the idea where, hey, if we go to closing right now at this price, and then you take out your commissions, you take out your closing costs, you take out all the obligations of things you have to pay, what would you walk away with? So it's called a seller net. And so you want to really figure out what that is. I always build in a buffer for things like concessions, right? A buyer may be asking for closing costs or something. So kind of you want to know what your seller net is, so that when you're considering things like concessions, you can kind of say, hey, either you can or you cannot accommodate for that. So ultimately, it's knowing your bottom line. And you want to take a look in your area and just see at the activity, because you ultimately want to say, hey, dropping the price is a strategy, but it's a difficult strategy when there's less buyers out there. So just keep that in mind. Um, and that's where it's helpful to know the activity in your area. What's going on? Is this something that, hey, should you just be prepared that it's going to take 5 months to sell this property? Well, dropping the price may not, speed that process up. So keep that in mind. Tip number two, obviously you want to market the property like crazy. And so this what, getting a real estate agent, this is where the real estate agent that you're working with matters. Um, Look, I'm not a real estate agent myself, but as I said, but I have worked with dozens, if not over 100 different agents in my region. And a huge part to this is they're not all created equal. And you really want to understand their marketing strategy, because at the end of the day, you do want to get it in front of people. And so just pitting on the MLS is not enough. So there needs to be a strategy. You want to make sure it's, uh, professional photos are getting done. You want to put that property in its best foot forward. Um, and then you want to consider offering incentives. Instead of lowering the price, I would encourage toward incentives as long as you are priced aggressively, meaning and competitively. Meaning if you are priced well, and for example, you are offering to do a rate buy down, and a rate buy down is basically you basically are paying to reduce their interest rate on their loan, for a period of time. And so that's something that uh, uh, an agent, along with maybe one of their lender partners, can explain to you what that looks like. You can also offer incentives like a concession towards like a flooring allowance or a paint allowance or something like that. Um, Again, consistently run those comps, because the comps that you ran, let's just say your property's been for sale for 5 months. The comps that were ran 5 months ago may not be applicable today, right? So those comps are getting stale. So then you want to run comps to see, again, the sold, the pending, and the active for sale, and see where you stand. Are you still competitively priced? Tip number three, offer to sell it on financing. Now, if you're going to offer this, keep a few things in mind. Offering financing may attract a buyer who just might be on the curve of being able to get financing, things like that. It basically, financing may be another way to attract a buyer. This could look like a lease option where someone would rent it with the option to buy it. This may look like something called like a bond for deed, contract for deed, or land contract, depending on the state you're in. Louisiana, we call it a bond for deed. And this is where the title stays with the seller, and the buyer makes payments over time, and eventually the title will transfer to the buyer. Or you can do traditional owner finance, title transfers to the buyer. The buyer basically pays the seller as if it was a mortgage. They make them payments. So this is something where previously, so I've sold properties on financing over the years. Previously, when I would offer this, my phone would ring off the hook. Let me be very honest. It is not ringing off the hook anymore. There is still a lull in buyers when it comes to this. And so you have to market differently whenever you're doing something like this. So selling with financing, not all agents are familiar with it. Not all agents are strong at marketing something that is for sale with financing. So it's not a guarantee for activity. And you need to understand a few things. Number one, your underlying financing. You need to understand if you can actually offer something like this. And one of the ways that basically that applies here is you have to make sure that whatever you are looking to offer, basically you're looking to sell it with time, right? You need to make sure that your financing is fixed long-term financing. For example, that you're not looking at something that's due in 12 months. Okay. Sometimes, especially if it's a flip that's not selling, that's really important. And then also, you need to know there are rules such as Dodd-Frank that limit what you can do when selling to an owner occupant. Just to give you an idea, it needs to be principal and interest. It can't be interest only. And also, you need to be careful, no balloons. You can't say, hey, I'm going to sell to you, and here is a 5-year balloon. The other thing with this is you need to make sure that that person can actually qualify for the financing you're selling it to them on. And so this is where it is important. If you're going to go this route, you need to go an extra mile of understanding what you can and cannot do. Number four, tip number four here, here's a strategy we did. We offered a property for sale with financing, and for rent, all at the same time. And I'll be honest, that we did that because after a while, when it was just sitting, we said, okay, let's offer it for all three and then go with whichever one we get someone for first. That is a good candidate. Obviously, you don't want to just take anyone, right? Like, you want to make sure that, you don't want to just take someone who's wanting to rent, and if they're not a good fit, but just take whatever happens first. And again, you need to make sure that your underlying financing can handle it. Number five, tip number five, pivot your strategy. So for example, if you were looking at flipping this, now you can say, hey, you know what? I was going to flip this. Let me actually go ahead and just keep this as a rental. One of the biggest things is time can help heal some wounds in real estate. And so basically, by pivoting your strategy, it allows you to wait for a better time in the market to sell. So for example, ultimately, if you say you're looking to flip a property, you now are going to go rent it out. And then let's just say the market improves, and in 2 years, you can then sell it again. You can attempt to sell it again. That is something that I want you to consider, but I think that ultimately you've got to say, hey, it's often not going to be something by choice. No one is wanting to change their plans right now, but the market is going to demand it at times, and that is where you should consider pivoting your strategy. Tip number six, consider doing a refinance. A lot of folks, again, especially people are looking at selling because, for example, they have a short-term debt, and it was a flip, right? They had a 12-month hard money loan, and now, hey, I can't turn into a rental, Courtney, because my loan is coming, up in 3 months. Courtney, I'm selling because this was a property that has a balloon that was due in 5 years, and now that 5 years is up, and I no longer have that financing. Okay, well then this is where I want to encourage you to do a refinance. Refinance, get long-term debt. Consider things like a DSCR loan, or going to a conventional bank and getting, basically bank financing. My preferences are private money, where it's individuals who lend on the deal, and I give them, monthly payments in return for them funding the deal with a loan. But right now, I say do a refinance, but right now, it is actually more common for people to do what's called a cash in refinance. Let me explain. So previously, everyone would talk about doing what's called the BRRRR method, where you would buy a property, renovate it, and then go ahead and rent it out, and then you would refinance. And a lot of times in a perfect BRRRR situation, you would refinance and actually walk away with some money. But right now, that's not the case. That was called a cash out refinance. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about a cash in refinance. Let me explain. Let's just say the ARV of something is $100,000. So something is worth 100,000. And at a 70% refinance, you would then be allowed to get a loan for 70,000, right? Well, if you owe 80 and you can only do a refinance for 70, what does that mean? That means you have to bring $10,000 to the table to refinance, and you're leaving 10,000 in the deal, plus the cost for the loan, right? So keep in mind, that's a very simple numbers, but keep in mind that that is a reality for folks right now. And so, but consider doing a cash in refinance. Now, tip number seven, maybe you say, Courtney, I don't have that $10,000, or maybe it's a 40,000 cash in refinance or whatever. Or Courtney, I've considered refinancing, but I don't have the cash to pay off this loan. I don't have the credit or the reserves to qualify for a refinance. Um, I want to encourage you. So my tip number 7 is to consider bringing in a partner. And this partner can lend the entire amount of money for either part ownership or for, interest, um, or bring them in to help qualify for the loan. And so as a partner, give them a percentage of ownership for qualifying for the loan with their credit. Maybe they can bring in the money for the cash in refinance, or maybe they can help with reserves necessary to buy the deal. These are all things that I want you to consider. Again, this is being creative, and you want to make sure you partner with the right folks. And so this is something where run the hypothetical by your lenders. In the event that I brought on a partner, what would that look like? Tip number 8. So this is a fun one, but again, right now, these are ideas on how to overcome a difficult market when it's difficult to sell a property. Tip number 8, move into it. Especially if the house you're currently living in right now has long-term fixed debt. And so you can rent out the house you're currently living in, move into the new house, and by moving into it, it actually changes your ability to refinance it. So if you move into it, you can then get an owner occupant loan, which is, anywhere from 0 to 3.5% down. It can be, better interest rates, and it's easier, a lot of times can be easier to qualify for. And so, especially if you can qualify for a loan like that, it is an option. Right now, there are builders who I know who are moving into their new builds that aren't selling. And so that is something to consider, especially, for example, if you're renting somewhere or if where you're currently living has fixed long-term debt, or even if the place that you're living is paid off, if you are flexible enough, that is an option. Maybe you say, hey, Courtney, it's not something I would do. Well, then do you have a grown child that you can move in there and they can get an owner occupant loan and you can work a deal with them? Tip number 9, this is more advanced, but you may want to look for a motivated buyer. Courtney, what do you mean it's a motivated buyer? Investors, when they go to sell rental properties they've owned for a long time, and they're going to have a very large tax hit from selling their rentals, there is something called a 1031 exchange. It's basically a tax deferment concept. And so these buyers can be 1031 exchange buyer are placed on a small timeline to go find what's called replacement property. Basically, they have to, when they sell their property, they have a short period of time to go buy another, and it has to fit a certain criteria. Again, it's in a short timeline, but they become motivated buyers because if they fail to buy another property, they ultimately can be hit with a very large tax bill. So no one wants that. No one loves that. And so they may become very motivated to buy. Look for a motivated 1031 exchange buyer to buy your property. And you may say, hey, Courtney, hey, this was just a property that, how do you go find those? Find them through networking. Maybe you can work with, there's real estate agents, they may work with investors, may say, hey, do you have any investors who have a 1031 exchange? I may have some properties they may want to buy. And tip number 10, here we are at the end of the list, you guys. Sell it at a loss. No one loves to do this, but keep with me here. You may say, Courtney, you're talking curse words here. Sell the property at a loss, but maybe that the lender that you had on it was a private lender. And let's just say for easy numbers, you have a loan with them for 100,000, but you can sell it for 85 right now. So the difference is 15,000. Well, you could just cut your losses, pay that 15,000 and be done with it. Or you could say, hey, to that private money lender, you can take that 15,000 and give them a small, a promise to pay, a promissory note, and give them a mortgage or a deed of trust against another one of your properties. For example, if you have other rentals, things like that, where you can say, hey, you know what? Let me pay you that difference instead of paying you all out cash right now. Let me pay you it over time and secure it against another property. You can consider selling at a loss and just take the loss today, or you can actually make a deal with the lender, depending if the lender is more flexible. Institutions are often not flexible, so this is great with seller financing people as well as with private lenders, where you say, hey, can I give you the balance on a note on one of my other properties? And so these are just 10 ideas, you guys. Look, at the end of the day, as a creative real estate investor, one of the biggest things that I do is when I have a problem, I just go to my notepad, I go to the drawing board, and I say, hey, let me start thinking of ideas. And I'll be honest right now, I have so many real estate agent friends who call me, so many other investor friends who call me, who just say, hey, Courtney, I've got a property that's not selling. I can't sell it right now. I have a flip that's not selling. One of my rentals that has a balloon, it's not selling, Courtney. What can I do? And that is where we think through ideas. Here are 10 of the ones that I've actually, suggested to other people, thought of, come up. But there's actually more that you can, if you just sat down and you thought through the problem, you say, hey, let me put some time. Let me just give myself a goal of thinking of 10 extra ideas, and then you just sit through there and give yourself time to be creative and think through solutions. You may find the solution you're looking for. Appreciate you guys staying tuned in. Appreciate you guys listening through the whole 10. If this was helpful, let me know in the comments below. And if you guys don't already know, I am doing one video a day for the first 100 days of 2025. And I hope this was helpful for you. Appreciate you guys. Make sure you're subscribed and follow along. See you soon.